right, take two, since the first one did not save, which is super fun. All right, for right now, we are learning about the Revolve tool. Okay, when we need to access Onshape, we need to go to our Documents page at the top. This time we are actually going to create a folder first before we create our files, so we can start to keep ourselves organized. So under the Create drop-down menu, we'll choose Folder. Okay, our folder name is going to be Practice Files, and we're going to choose Create. Okay, once you create your folder, right, we can open our folder by clicking on it, and then when we create our document, it will be within this folder. So we're going to create our document. It's going to be Revolve and your name. Make sure you're putting your name there instead of the words your name. We choose OK. All right, and it will create our workspace and load everything in. All right, so to create this object, so we are going to learn about the Revolve tool. Revolve is right next to our extrude. Remember, we can't use it until we actually have sketches, our 2D sketches. But basically what this does is it spins a shape around a line, is the easiest way to explain it. So we're going to start with our sketch, okay, because again, remember we have to start with a 2D shape before we can do anything three-dimensional. Okay, we're going to start on our front plane. Remember, if you'd like to view it on that flat view where the actual plane is parallel to your viewing surface here, we can choose our front. Okay, if we chose front, we could choose front on our view cube. But again, if we chose like top or right, you can choose the actual side that you chose. So we chose our front plane. All right, and this time we are going to use some of the tools we have not used yet, including our 3-point arc. Okay, our 3-point arc here, when we choose that tool, if you haven't used it before, I would suggest trying it out. So it lets you place the first point, you place the second end point, and then our third click, okay, actually chooses the radius, right? So depending on how far you want it to be, you move your cursor and you can create these arcs. So if you notice, again, like we talked about last time, having the actual tool on your cursor, it'll continue to let you make that same shape until you get rid of it off of your cursor. So you have a couple options here. You can right click and hit Escape Arc. Okay, you could choose the tool again. Okay, or you can hit the Escape key. All of those make it to where you no longer have that tool on your cursor. Okay, we can hit the back arrow or Control Z to take those away. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to create our 3-point arc. It's going to be from our origin. Okay, so our origin is that intersection point between all of our planes. We choose our origin as our first point. Okay, somewhere up across here is our second point. Okay, and let's say somewhere curved down this way is our third point. So if you notice, our value here for our radius, so R is radius, is in that little box still. So that means we can just type and it will automatically wind up changing this value. So we're going to type 2 for our 2 inches, since that's our default unit. Okay, if you notice, this little box, little dot, is pretty far away. Remember, we need to hit Escape or click on our tool, or right click and Escape to get that off of our cursor. Okay, we can move these around. If you notice, they are blue. Okay, blue means that they're not fully constrained, which means you have the ability to change them. Okay, this one here was connected to a point in geometry, so we can't move this one. Okay, and if you notice it should be a black circle now instead of blue. So what we want to do is we need to practice our dimension tool. So remember, that gives us our measurements. We click on our dimension tool. We're actually going to choose this center point, okay, and our origin. Okay, if you notice, depending on where your cursor is, it'll give you different angles to measure. Okay, the one we're trying to use, okay, is this directly vertical from the origin to that center point. When we click one more time, it'll set that number down. We want this to be 2 inches. Again, so if we pause or we escape that dimension for a moment, we see that this little dot at the end is still blue. So that means even though this one turned black because it's fully constrained, it can't move anymore, okay, this one still isn't fully constrained. It still can move. So we're actually going to take a second and dimension that one too. So we'll hit our dimension button. We'll choose our origin. We'll choose our point right here. Again, depending on where your cursor is, it will try and create different measurements. We want it to be straight across like this. So we need to click our cursor again, and then we can type our value too. All right, now when we escape our tool, we cannot move any of these, right? If you notice, this is just the curve. Even though there are leader lines and dimension lines here, this is just a curve that's not a fully enclosed shape. Okay, it's just that one arc. So what we still need to do is we're going to use our line tool, okay, all the way on the side here. Okay, we're going to connect our dots, okay, between our center of our arc and that segment, center, and the segment. If you notice, once I close that out, this shades in, okay, because it is a complete profile. So that means our shape is fully enclosed, which means we can use it for extrusions, revolves, and so forth. Okay, but before we actually go do that, we want to add one more line for this object, just somewhere down on the bottom here. If you notice, if we want it to be horizontal, it'll snap and it'll wind up that dotted line for a moment. That's what we're going for. If you see, there's a little kind of horizontal line down to the right of my cursor. That's showing that automatically it is using the horizontal constraint, which we'll talk about more about constraints a little later. So if you notice, our line tool is still on our cursor. We need to hit escape or right click or choose the tool again. And this time it doesn't really matter how long this line is. Okay, it can be whatever length you want, but we do need to change how far away it is from our origin. So we're going to choose our dimension tool, we're going to choose our origin, and we're going to choose that line so we can measure between the two. Again, we have to click to drop that number. We want it to be 1 inch. We hit enter, and that will finish our sketch here. So we're going to choose our green checkbox to accept our sketch. Since we don't see it turn, we're going to move our view back to our almost isometric angle here so we can see as we start to use our revolve tool. So again, our revolve tool is right next to our extrude. When we choose revolve, again, we're basically spinning a shape around a line. So we have to choose which shape, which closed profile, again, like the shaded one here, which shaded profile to use, but then it needs an axis to revolve around. So it shows as red since we still need to select something for it. So we need to actually click on that revolve axis so that then we can choose where we will revolve it around. Okay, if you notice as we move around, it'll highlight sections, but we want to click on our line that we create. And it'll automatically pop up that profile wrapped around the axis we chose. So we have a couple more options here. Okay, we do have full, where it goes all the way around. We have one direction where we can change the degrees and it'll wrap around one side. Symmetric, where it'll go from one half and the other half, but also two directions where we can choose how much it goes from that one plane to our right and our left hand, or clockwise, counterclockwise directions. For this one, we're just going to choose the full, and we are going to accept our revolve. There are a couple things that can be helpful for our parts like this, and one of them is being able to edit things that we've done. Okay, so let's say we messed up with our revolve. We We can go back to our browser over here on the right. We could either right click and edit, or we can double click and it would let us change, okay, anything about our Revolve. We're going to accept that. We want to leave our Revolve, but in this case, we actually do want to change our sketch. So the original geometry that we drew to create this shape. So we're going to double click on that sketch or right click and edit. And what we actually want to do, okay, I'm going to choose the front plane again so it's parallel to our viewing angle. We actually want to double click on our distance between the origin and the line, and we're actually going to make this 2 inches as well. So we type 2, we hit enter, we see it automatically changes. We're going to accept these changes and go back to our other view. If you've noticed, so we can right click to be able to orbit, okay, it is a much wider gap in our donut shape here that we can see we just changed by changing that one line. So it automatically will update as you go backwards and make edits. Is one of the benefits of our 3D modeling programs. Okay, make sure, so before you submit it, make sure you choose one of our isometric, almost isometric views so we can see a little better and so that we can see our curve. So my suggestion would be either top, right, and back, or our classic, which would be best, our top, front, and right. And that is our completed object.